seconds. Shead driving, looking up. 1 second to go for the win. He got it. The Cougars win it. Number one remains number one. Cougars reset. Jackson again finds it, and the Houston Cougars go from the first floor out to the Sweet 16.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby.
Yes! Welcome to the Scott Holland podcast. A few weeks out from recording a show, and I don't think I could do this without acknowledging, at least in the last week or so, Hurricane Beryl went through Houston. I think mercifully, Dustin, you were out of town for that as the one Houstonian of the trio here, and I from what it sounds like, probably wouldn't have been too badly affected had you stayed in town. But we know many of y'all out there lost power for an extended period of time, still don't have power, and I could probably do multiple podcasts. I could probably do an entire series of podcasts about the various failings in leadership that have led to that. But we want to know that as in my case, so I consider myself a Houstonian no matter where I am on this planet. Bobby, you spent many years you enjoyed very much in Houston. We love Houston. Our hearts are always with Houston. We're with all of y'all who lost power. Any of y'all have like a good worthy charity, you know how to reach out to us, and we'll try to use what platform we have here to do that. But couldn't acknowledge the stuff we talk about here, the absence that we've had here for a few weeks here, kind of a little mini summer vacay for the trio of co-hosts here, but it can't do that without acknowledging it's been very tough go recently in Houston. The derecho a couple of months ago, this hurricane afterwards, like my sincerest thoughts and hopes are that the city I love, the city I grew up in, the city of this university that we love so much, we do a regular podcast about, stops going through it. So we're thinking about all of y'all back in the Houston area that are still dealing with those after effects, and glad to be back talking Houston Cougars. To be kind of a newsy episode. I think a fair amount of stuff has broken here during the summer. Some stuff that we have expected, media days, the usual summer football recruiting, which we're excited about, some Cougar basketball at the post collegiate level stuff to talk about, NBA draft stuff, Vegas Summer League, a little bit of that. TBT coming up, a number of Cougar greats will be playing in the Fertitta Center in a matter of a few days. Explicable contract extension cover, one subject we've done a fair amount this summer. So a lot of different topics to hit on, Dustin. I'm going to pretend like I haven't literally seen you in person in the last week or so. How you doing, friend?
I'm doing great. Coming off of a week plus long vacation with my fiance. We had a fantastic time, did lots of stuff. Saw you out in Vegas. Saw a couple shows out there. It was a really, really good time. Obviously, kind of bittersweet to not be here when the city is going through it, like you mentioned with Hurricane Beryl. Not loving, emptying out my my refrigerator and throwing everything away for the second time in like a couple of months, but definitely had it better than a lot of people. I mean, even like the last couple of days I've been back this week, I've been going to work on Monday and Tuesday, and they're like the last two lights before I get to work are out, and so it just backs everything like way the hell up. And I start getting annoyed. I'm like, how do you not have this fixed yet? And they go, oh, right. Like there's a couple 100,000 people that don't even have power in their homes yet. This is not the worst thing that anyone's dealing with in the city right now. So definitely thoughts going out to the people of Houston and hoping to see something, again, not to get too off topic here, but some things change in regards to the city's readiness to deal with adverse weather events. But to get back to the subject of our podcast, like you said, lots of stuff to be talking about. We haven't had an actual just like regular recapping all the Cougar news in a little over a month. So that might be the longest we've gone since we first started doing this podcast. So that's just, us needing a little break and us having some other breaking news to cover like we've done in the last few weeks. So glad to be back with you guys and just kind of talking all the various Cougar sports goings on.
Bobby, how's it going, bud?
It's been a very long 2 months for me, as you guys know. Not saying too much, but it's been a long couple of months. It's finally starting to wind down, and August and football season and Cougar sports can't get here soon enough. So really looking forward to it. And one of my favorite things is getting on here and talking with you guys on a Tuesday evening to talk some Cougar sports.
So you're the one of the three of us that actually has played the new EA college football, the first one in a decade. Like I get, don't want to do a full segment worth of this, but like,
no, we can.
No, we can. We won't.
Take yourself away from that to come talk to us. Honestly, y'all go ahead. I'm not walking away from this.
Well, I joined
30
a
seconds.
League.
How's it?
I joined a bowling league, and like last night I was like, I had access, but like we're selling our house and everything, so we had our inspection yesterday, so I had to leave like when it came out, and then I didn't get home till about 10:30 last night, and I was like, can we finish bowling? Can we finish bowling? And like I got home and I played it for about an hour, then I went to bed, and I played for a little bit today, but we had some more stuff going on, and I had errands to run and do all that kind of stuff. So like I'm tweaking right now, but I will tell you the 2024 season, according to the game, will not go well for the Cougs. In fact, we will go 1-11 with a win against UNLV, and we will be losing our entire quarterback room.
Good news for virtual me, not getting his UNLV alum boss making fun of him for losing to the Running Rebels, but. I guess it's a good thing that real life Willie Fritz and not virtual you is Ryan Shead University. With all respect to you, my friend.
I didn't even change the playbook. I still went with the Willie Fritz playbook. And one thing that there's a lot of in the playbook that I don't know where they're basing it off of, if it was last year's Tulane or something like that. A lot of RPOs, and a lot of option plays, and not traditional like triple where you run out and you pitch, but run up the gut or the quarterback keeps it. So if that is a thing, that's something we loved about Donovan Smith last year when he was running effectively, when the coaching staff would actually let him kind of open the game up with his legs. So if that's any indicator of what we're going to see this year, hopefully it's better than 1-11, but the offensive playbook, it does look nice.
Yeah, that's a silver lining. The offense is finally going to do RPOs, and that real life Willie Fritz is our coach, and not you, my good friend Bobby. Another silver lining is that no matter who you are, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you can avail yourself of our sponsors and good friends, Charlie Hustle. Their fantastic vintage collegiate gear, including a fantastic Houston Cougar collection on the World Wide Web at charliehustle.com. Be sure to use our promo code POD15, PAWD15, like podcast, save 15% off your order at Charlie Hustle. It's more the t-shirt season, but if you're like me and like to stock up on maybe the colder weather gear during the warm months, also a fantastic collection of crew necks and hoodies for the Coogs as well. Really fantastic collection across the Big 12 and college sports generally. So please support our friends at Charlie Hustle, charliehustle.com. And of course, got to mention our network friends, the 1012 Network. Yours truly just appeared on our 1012 Friends, Bosco's Boys, their K-State podcast to talk about the Cougar season, talk a little U of H K-State. So keep your ears peeled for that one as well. Please, like many of you do already, go to patreon.com/SHPAWDcast. Give us a little something each month if you like what you do and have a little bit of discretionary income to throw the way of the three of us. I think that's all the catching up. That's all the housekeeping, guys. Let's talk about that as of yet unfilled athletic director position at all of our alma maters.
Yeah, moving a little bit slowly, I think, with not
surprisingly, I don't think.
Yeah, I guess not. It is a little bit strange. Oh, well, part of that was Dr. Couture being out of town. It's like, okay, then why did we let him go when she was out of town? When it was just a general, he's not raising enough money. Did you just realize that while Dr. Couture is out of town? That still makes the timing of the whole thing a little bit weird to me, but it is what it is. We are where we are. We're looking for a new athletic director. It sounds like we'll probably have one in the next week or two, hopefully. Joseph Duarte's article on the search indicated that Dr. Couture, I think, kind of like we suspected, prefers a Brett Yormark style, non-traditional athletic director pick here. I think, which kind of vibes with the statement that she gave about the changing times in athletics when she let Pesman go. Although JD's article, I think, also acknowledged there were other people in the decision-making process who maybe preferred a little bit more of a conventionally proven track record type of candidate. So, but I was thinking more about this. I think the reason that Couture and probably many U of H fans are so interested in someone with at least as much of a business mind as they have a sports mind is not just because that's kind of the broader trend in college athletics, but I think it's kind of like we talked about. It is the financial challenges at Houston specifically. Houston has the lowest operating budget among P5 schools. They have one of the highest levels of subsidies from the schools of any school in the country. So just not sustainable. Kind of like we've talked about. That's, Chris Pesman had 6 or 7 years to fix that, didn't do it. And I think that's why he's gone. And that's job number 1, 2, and 3, I think, for the next person is getting the money-ish aspect right. And I'm not saying that because I think that, hiring good coaches who will win games isn't an important part of the job. I'm saying that because I think if all of U of H sports have reasonable budgets, have reasonable NIL war chests, whatever that is for the sport in question, I think 3 idiots like us could probably be put in charge of hiring the coaches, and we'd probably do fine because a school located in Houston in the Big 12, if those financial aspects are figured out, is going to attract a ton of good candidates every time any coaching job opens up in any sport. So as we kind of we'll get into in a little bit here, the names that Duarte has thrown out, just since our last article, which was immediately after Pesman got fired, that's one of the things I've been ruminating on is just even more so than I already kind of was convinced that the financial aspect is probably the most important thing in terms of what UH is looking for right now.
Yeah, I think it's going to certainly play the biggest role in everything. I mean, Dr. Couture has pretty much flat out said that in her statement, to your point, Dustin. I think if you are expecting U of H to go, we talked about this when Pesman was fired. I like the idea kind of the your mark, but I still feel you need somebody who has at least some sports background in the hire. So there are some people, we said we were going to talk about them here in a minute, that have been floated in things like that. And I think the biggest problem that U of H has, and Sam and I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, was, the financial aspect was really hurt by the fact that there's a generation of Cougar fans or Cougar students who aren't Cougar fans. Those years between when the Southwest Conference broke up and probably 2005, 2006, somewhere in there, those fans or those students did not become U of H fans. The product was bad in just about every sport. It wasn't fun to watch outside of baseball, because I'm pretty sure baseball was pretty good in there as well.
Shout out early days Rainer Noble.
Yeah. So it was, that whole generation is just kind of lost. Think about when you go to games now. You see people our age and younger, or you see people that constantly like to bring up, Yeoman and times like that. And so you don't see a lot of people who were students and became fans. And so I think the new AD is going to have to work on that generation of Cougar students, if they're even possible. And the other thing in Houston is you're going to have to partner with people and companies that don't have UH alumni as their CEOs and bosses and things like that. They just see the Houston community and they want to invest in that.
Yeah, which I think you see at a number of schools, like, not to use Louisville as the perfect example, and I'm sure there is a heavy overlap between people that attended Louisville and in the local community there, but become like this city's team, become the team of companies that might have leadership people that came from other schools, become Houston's team. Kind of like you've seen in a microcosm for the basketball team, which unrealistic example because not all of your program, like expecting your football program to be a perennial top 5, top 10 team is.
I didn't expect our basketball.
No, I'm not saying you did. I'm using that as kind of a hey. Right. I know a lot of people who have become like U of H basketball fans who don't have the ties to U of H like us. Dustin, I'm sure you've seen plenty of that. Like, to be able to build that without necessarily having a top 5, top 10 product, I think the university did solve part of the equation of having a head coach there who I think can maximize what you're capable of football wise and finding out like what Willie Fritz can do here. So the football product isn't a joke. So the football product isn't hampering that. But yeah, I think approaching the larger community, which I think was kind of the second part where you said, Bobby, I think is going to be very, very important. Getting those people to understand the value prop of aligning with U of H, supporting U of H, and how that's part of your community vision there. I think that's important. It's not all of it, but I think it's a very, very important part of it that whoever comes into the job next is going to figure out, and just maybe not going to the media every every 6 months or so and just talking about, we just don't have the money to do this, not the money to do that. And I think Dr. Couture got kind of sick of that. And that is at least some part of why the last guy's no longer in his position.
Yeah. I mean, Sam and Dustin, I think I've discussed this with you guys before. We need to become a lot of people in Houston's number 2 team.
Yep.
Right. Like,
I think you said that on here before, and I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. We need to be people's number 2 team where your team plays on Saturday at 3:00. U of H kicks off at 7, or U of H kicks off at 3, and your team kicks off at 7. And you're like, you know what? Let's go to the U of H game. It's local. It's fun. We can support the city. I love living here. This is the city's university. And that's how you get kids to fall in love with the university too, right? So I think a lot of us can talk about, I think all 3 of us can say that, like, the times we remember and when we fell in love with universities were when we went to the games or followed them as a kid, right? I remember going to UTEP games as a kid when they would play TCU and SMU. My grandparents would come in town and we'd go do that kind of stuff. So, I remember going to UTA basketball games when they played on the stage, and I just kind of was like, yeah, UTA is kind of cool. Just when you're 8 and you're going to college basketball games, that's just kind of fun. And that's how you build Cougar fans and a fan base.
And I'll give our university a little credit. As somebody who grew up from, whose childhood was about early 90s to early to mid 2000s, and just U of H was a complete non-factor in my childhood because, quite honestly, like you said, why? Like the team was terrible. The team was terrible, and it was the university that was second closest to like where I grew up. Like, that's the thing. It sounds funny to say like, oh, Rice was the more competent athletic program, but it's like, okay, my family didn't have ties to U of H or Rice specifically, and Rice was closer and at least marginally better. And so I think at least U of H has solved that part. I think that's good, but I think it's taking that next step that's important. And I think probably should talk about the specific people that have been brought up for the position.
Yeah, as I said, I've seen 5 names that Joseph Duarte has thrown out so far. 3 in his original article from a week or so ago, and then a couple that he's thrown out on Twitter. So we'll run through those real quick, and then I'll let you all each pick who you want to talk about first. So the 5 names I've seen are Keli Zinn, who is the Executive Deputy Director of Athletics and Chief Operating Officer for LSU Athletics. Oliver Luck, who I believe is currently unemployed, but has had a wide-ranging resume of sports.
He's the commissioner of an FCS football league, the United Athletic Conference, which is it's an amalgamation of the WAC and one of the Atlantic Sun. That was it.
There you go. The other 3: Eddie Nunez, current athletic director at University of New Mexico; Matt Roberts, current athletics director for the College of Charleston; and David Fletcher, the general manager for Lone Star Sports and Entertainment, who I'm sure Bobby can tell us more about with his job history. So those are the 5. Bobby, why don't you get us started? Who do you want to talk about first out of this list?
All right, so I actually worked with Fletch. I actually he's director of Lone Star Sports and Entertainment, which is part of the Texans. I met him when I worked for the Texans. He actually wasn't the director when I was there, and then he became it towards the end of the time I was there. Fun fact, I actually interviewed with him. Lone Star Sports Entertainment is actually the side of the Texans business that I find most interesting because I love college sports. I remember working that bowl game that I got to do that year. It was Syracuse versus Minnesota. And that was my favorite event that I did the whole time I worked for the Texans. And I got to do some cool stuff there. But Fletch, really good guy. Really enjoy talking to him. In the interview that I had with him, from what I remember, it was about 11 years ago. It was really good. And he's done a lot with Lone Star Sports and Entertainment. You've seen that really grow. For those of you that don't know, Lone Star Sports Entertainment does the college games, does the soccer games. Any event that's not a Texans game or the rodeo that happens at NRG is pretty much Lone Star Sports and Entertainment. So when it comes to the business acumen of running a sports program, he can do it, right? He knows what things cost. He has business connections in the city of Houston, which is something we desperately need. As we've already said, that's something we need to talk about and that we need to improve on. And my only concern with Fletch would be, he didn't really hire football guys or anything like that. He didn't come from the football side of the business, so he doesn't really have the X's and O's, or, not that you need your AD to have X's and O's experience, but he doesn't really have that experience with hiring, firing coaches, things like that. He's more on the business side, so hopefully, I'm really hoping that if we do go with him, he's got the experience in Houston, he's got the contacts in Houston, all of that. I'm hoping that maybe we get a good associate AD who can actually, kind of pull on some of those levers and do things like that in terms of hiring, firing coaches, stuff of that nature.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by Fletcher because of kind of the financial aspect that you're talking about, and was, from what I've read, experienced handling, selling sponsorships for the Texans and things like that. So a lot of the financial aspect there, I think he could handle. And kind of like you said, in terms of just putting on a good game day experience and knowing what goes into that, he certainly has that experience as well. Of the five, I think he's the only one that doesn't really have direct college athletics experience. So it is kind of a knock, but kind of like I said up front, I think the actual picking the coaches to hire and fire, he hasn't done that. That's also the thing I'm least worried about. We can figure that out if we are putting on a game day experience that makes casual fans want to come out, and if we are, earning enough income to finally have the University of Houston athletics department acting a little bit more like, your average P4 athletics department in that sense.
And I would add also, besides the fact he has an elite goatee, you have to definitely add that with this candidate. But no, in all seriousness, I think you hire, in addition to someone like Fletcher, somebody who maybe comes from a smaller school, and it's okay, like maybe you're the number one at a SoCon school or something like that, and you've done pretty well there, and it's okay, like your next chance to move up and potentially even succeed Fletcher down the road if in 4 or 5 years he does a good enough job, wants to move on to something else, wants to go back kind of into the the pro sports business side. Again, you have somebody with maybe that administrative experience, because I think Fletcher really does give you what I talked about earlier, the chance to build connections locally and kind of get some of those entities to open up their pocketbooks and kind of draw on the past experience he's had with Lone Star Sports Entertainment. So that is a knock, but I think one that could be overcome by smart hiring around someone like Fletcher. And I would be interested in that just because of all the stuff you guys said about his background.
Yeah. All right, Sam, other than Fletcher, who's another name you like out of this five?
One we heard recently from Joseph Duarte, Oliver Luck, somebody who's a familiar name in the Houston area. I think has made Houston largely did work as the athletic director of West Virginia. He played at West Virginia, is originally, I think, from Cleveland. So from that kind of Rust Belt part of the country, but someone who's lived in Houston a long time, really interesting CV. Currently the commissioner of the FCS Football United Athletic Conference, kind of a mashup of the former Atlantic Sun and WAC football playing members, former West Virginia athletic director, was the XFL league commissioner when they had their 2020 season, former Houston Sports Authority CEO, Houston Dynamo president. I think the critique with him would be that he hasn't been an athletic director in this current era with NIL, with the changing priorities of facilities versus just funding, bringing in like the talent acquisition, using NIL in that regard, plus everything that comes with the recent House versus NCAA Supreme Court decision. It's a fair critique, one I wouldn't have a direct counterpoint to, but I would say in advocating for Luck that there isn't really a job role that he's had where he hasn't had a positive impact. Just to give a few examples, when he was the Dynamo's president, did a lot of the legwork to get the funding for the Dynamo soccer-specific downtown stadium. Shell Energy Stadium, I believe is what it's called now. The artist formerly known as BBVA Compass Stadium, his role as president there. During his time in West Virginia, he was there. He oversaw programs transition to the Big 12 Conference, helped get an on-campus baseball stadium, along with hiring their super successful and just recently retired head coach, Randy Mazey. School got off NCAA probation while he was in charge, got beer sales back at football games, navigated a tricky situation when Dana Holgerson was brought in as the head coach in waiting. And I think brought in a guy like who we know Dana's flaws, I think, better than anybody after having lived his last 5 years as head coach here. But I would say a fairly successful run there with the Mountaineers, with him replacing Bill Stewart. I think oversaw a super successful XFL Spring 2020 season, which only didn't last because of the onset of COVID-19. Was successful enough that they rebooted the thing with different ownership a few years later. I can't remember if I said this in our group chat or just to Bobby, but I think kind of like with Stewart, if Luck takes the job, my hope is that he hires that smaller conference AD to maybe be his number two to do more of the day-to-day administrative stuff and let Luck be, focus on what he's good at. Let him be the guy who fundraises, gets the U of H fans and Houston community at large opening their pocketbooks and maybe donating away they weren't under the previous regime. So he's not the only name that intrigues me. He's not the only name I would like, but he was kind of the first name that I thought of when I was putting together my notes for the show.
Yeah, I like him a lot as an option. I think kind of for a lot of the reasons you said. He's just been there's hardly my first joke that I think I had in my notes was there might be quicker to list these sports jobs he hasn't had than the ones that he has had, from being a conference commissioner, like you said, CEO / commissioner for the XFL, had an administrative job with the NCAA for a few years. You mentioned his time at West Virginia, the Dynamo, CEO of the Houston Sports Authority, was president of NFL Europe back in the day. I did not realize until doing some research for this episode. And of course, like you mentioned, famously Andrew Luck's father, and Houston based, which I think is not just why Houston's interested in him. I think that's why he's interested in Houston. I think with his CV, kind of like you said, he's been so successful at so many sports jobs. It's hard to think of a sports job you wouldn't at least hear him out if you wanted to come interview for it. So I think he's someone in terms of if you want to have a just face of the athletics department that people already kind of know and have positive feelings with. I think Oliver Luck certainly has by far the most name recognition in the city of Houston. I think of the 5 people that we have on the list. How effective is that going to be into, because that's only so effective if it actually helps you turn that into, dollars of revenue. So is he the one that would get the most money flowing to Houston of the 5? I don't know, but I can believe that his connections and having been around in the sports world, having been around in the Houston sports world for so long, seems like the kind of connected person with a lot of deep pocketed friends that you'd want for the job.
Yeah, for me, he was, when I saw his name, I definitely was like, he's not my first choice. He's not my last choice either. Every job that he's had, he's always felt like a guy who handles the transition to another step in the process, right? West Virginia, he handled the Big 12 transition as they moved from the Big East to the Big 12. Right? They were Big East, not ACC. I don't know why my brain was like, hey, wait a minute, no. He handled some of the NCAA stuff, to Sam's point. He kind of handled some of that stuff. The Dynamo moving, winning the championships, and kind of transitioning to this different era of soccer in Houston and getting them the stadium and things like that. He feels like a guy who comes in, he's your steady hand, right? He's doing that alliance of those 2 conferences that have basically collapsed. He's kind of just your steady hand who can come in. I think, to your point, Sam, I would love to see who he brings in as like an associate AD, a number 2 to handle the transition. I think that the person he would bring in to be his number 2 would kind of be the AD in waiting, while Oliver Luck did this for about 4 years, kind of saw the transition and got everything leveled out and steady. That really feels like what this athletic department needs right now, is a steady hand to kind of keep everything going in a smooth way.
Yeah, one of the names that I liked on the list was Keli Zinn from LSU, LSU's website. She's only been there 2 years. Was previously another person that spent time in the administration at West Virginia. Actually, I believe was briefly the interim athletics director at West Virginia, which made her the first female athletics director in the school's history. But the last couple of years at LSU, and the 2 years she's been at LSU, the LSU's website said she renegotiated the school's multimedia rights partnership, which earned a 21% increase for the school. And if you're someone who focuses more on the team results, LSU's general sporting results the last 2 years, even by their own high standards, have been very good. 20 of their 21 teams have reached the NCAA postseason at least once. LSU finished in the top 10 of the Directors' Cup for the first time in over a decade while she was there. So, I think maybe a little bit less on the Houston ties here than some of the other people that we've talked about. But just in terms of someone who, if you are looking for maybe more of a long-term pick in the next 4 years, someone still pretty young, but who already has a pretty proven track record in college athletics, while at the same time not being just a athletics person where you go, okay, you see the financial aspect is there too. You see she's got both the college athletics experience and also the, hey, I know what it takes in the last couple of years, and the as recent as you can get, and obviously college athletics changes every couple of days, but as recent an experience in college athletics as you can get, she has that at a school with a big budget, knows what that takes, and that's the reason why I think she's probably my top 3 choices, along with Luck and Fletcher.
Yeah, someone with more I think recent experience as an administrator than Luck. I think a really nice combination of the administrative leadership background that you might have valued a bit more in the pre-NIL current landscape AD search, but is still valued. But I would say someone who also unmistakably had a big hand in LSU's NIL effort, their fundraising, which we've said, I think ad nauseum this episode and previous ones, is job number one at U of H right now. If you want to play devil's advocate, I think fundraising at LSU and her last stop, West Virginia, before that, it's a bit of a different animal than fundraising at U of H. Those two schools that I mentioned are big institutions, the big institution in their respective states, in a way that a city university like U of H, with maybe fewer t-shirt fans and maybe more of a non-traditional student alumni base, just isn't. Not saying that she can't do the job. And like you, Dustin, I think she's definitely part of the trio of candidates I'd be really intrigued in taking the job. That would just be the biggest question mark pre-hire if you want to play devil's advocate. But again, she gets a lot of credit for the way LSU's athletic department has embraced NIL and been really ahead of the curve there. And that, I think, according to her profile, LSU has seen notable upticks in revenue and donor support. So I think a lot of reasons to be excited about her if she was the person who ends up taking the job.
Yeah, that was my big critique, is it feels like if you're at LSU, you're at the place where everybody wants to be associated with. It's easy to walk into a business and a big company in Louisiana and go, hey, you want to donate a bunch of money? We'll put you on a banner at the stadium, and they will almost always say yes. As long as you're asking the right size business for the right amount of money, they're probably going to say yes. So that's my only critique is, as much as we, the three of us and the Houston fan base want to imagine that we are the big dogs in the city and we are the ones that get attention, it's different to raise money at U of H than it is at LSU.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point, certainly, but again, I think I kind of go back to it. Seemed like even by LSU's standards, she got things going even more positively. So you hope she can do that elsewhere. But again, I completely agree. LSU's domination of the state of Louisiana is not what University of Houston experiences in the city of Houston. So definitely a different situation to be in. Not really that thrilled about going with the AD from a smaller school route in Eddie Nunez or Matt Roberts. Anybody want to make a spirited defense of either of those two guys?
I mean, Eddie Nunez made a nice football hire in Bronco Mendenhall, and I think UNM is to Albuquerque, which is probably, it's not Houston, not even close, but it is a bigger city than I would say, us once and current Houstonians would give it credit for. So it is very much kind of like the team of New Mexico, and it is probably embraced by a lot of people who didn't attend the university there. But I don't know, man. Like it's not like they've been lighting the world. Like they had a good basketball team this year, but it's not like they've been a consistent power at that level. I don't know. It just doesn't excite me. It doesn't feel like that's really that, or the College of Charleston AD would be like, if you're going to hire those guys, quite honestly, I'm not someone who really wanted to keep Chris Pesman for a long term. Quite honestly, why don't you just stay with Chris Pesman if those are the hires you're going to make? Like it's no more creative than those two guys.
Yeah, my only other person that I've said that I would like to see hired, or at least spoken to, is Lisa Campos in San Antonio at UTSA. That really feels like a move. While we may not be super excited about just getting somebody from a smaller school, that really feels like a situation that's really close to U of H, just on a slightly smaller level. Big city where a lot of people aren't necessarily going to buy in. You're not the number one thing in town. You are going to have to work with people who maybe graduated somewhere else, didn't go to your school, are fans of another team. And she's done a really good job at UTSA. I think we can all agree UTSA athletic programs are pretty good, but they're also not funded in the way U of H is. So I believe she would have that ability to fundraise something like that. She hasn't come through on the list, so it's just me kind of saying, it's somebody I wouldn't have, when I first heard somebody throw her name out, I was kind of like, what? And I kind of looked it up, and she's done a lot of really good work at UTSA. So that would be my only person who I would want from a smaller school to kind of jump up, things like that. Because it really feels like, just like San Antonio is to Houston in terms of their sizes, UTSA to U of H kind of feels the same way. And if she can be successful in San Antonio with that, I feel like she could be successful in Houston.
I think that's a good point. I've seen
it well in NIL too.
Yeah. I've seen other people throw a name out there. Certainly, it seems like an athletics department on the upswing. That, again, you might, other than the fact that Houston is now in the Big 12, whereas UTSA is still in a lesser conference. I mean, other than that, UTSA is a fairly good, about as good of an analog for Houston as you're going to see. in terms of geographic location, city size, and things like that. So I think good points there. And even with like Nunez and Roberts, I mean, Nunez spent some time in LSU's administration. Roberts had kind of a money-related job with Oklahoma previously. So it's not like either of those guys even has a just complete lack of, big conference, understanding of what it takes to run a program at a power conference level. But I think maybe we all agree here that Fletcher, Luck, and Zinn are kind of the three that stand out to us. And I think Campos is a good call either. In terms of people that it would be very easy to get me, I think, very excited about as Houston's AD.
Yeah, would agree with that.
All right. So speaking of some AD related stuff, Houston, since our last episode, we now know at the end of June, officially gave a 1-year contract extension to University of Houston softball coach Kristin Vesely. The contract was signed by Chris Pesman and Kristin Vesely a year ago in June of last year, but was not finalized until the end of June this year when it was signed by Houston's interim athletic director and general counsel. And I'll throw it to you guys here in a minute, but there's two things that just jump out to me that I just can't help but just find really mind-boggling about the situation. Number one, I'm not a contract lawyer, but the idea of signing a contract and then intentionally not finalizing it for an entire year seems sketchy as hell. I can't say that Chris Pesman or the University of Houston Athletic Department at large's intention was to grant her a completely unearned extension without having to publicly announce that that's what they did or to allow anybody to figure out that they did so through open records requests. But I can say that it had that effect, and I can't think of another reason to do it. So just very, very sketchy. Dying to know who all in the U of H athletics department, in the U of H leadership tree, knew that was going on, because that seems extremely sketchy, not to keep using that word. And then number two, not a contract lawyer, but, again, I'll say that again. So I have no idea what kind of legal requirement the University of Houston was under to honor a contract extension that was signed by the, at the time, athletics director and the coach in question, but was not finalized until after Pesman's departure. I kind of genuinely hope that what we're going to learn in the next week or two is that the legal situation that U of H found themselves in, very nice, Sam, thank you, was one where they were going to have to buy out Vesely's contract if they were going to get rid of her. Because, I mean, if that is the case, if it kind of is a formality that it got signed, and and if they were going to fight it, that if they declined to sign it, that Vesely would have the opportunity to fight them in court and make it a whole lawsuit out of it. If that is the case, it maybe a little bit makes sense. And if that's the case, then maybe there is still a possibility that the new athletic director, whoever they are, will come in, look at her 1-year contract and decide it's not too late in the cycle to cut bait and make it a good decision and pay the buyout. But I don't know. I can't say I'm super optimistic. It would be very weird to sign a coach's contract extension in June and then fire that coach in July. But I guess stranger things have happened in college athletics. So, yeah, not great news overall. I think we were all kind of hoping for some kind of natural resolution to the Kristin Vesely situation, such that there was not even a question of whether or not she was going to be back for the 2025 season. But now that seems very much up in question, and probably leaning towards, if I had to bet, that in fact she will be back for one more year. So not loving that situation, guys.
Yeah, I realize people are going to sign things on different dates. Even a difference of 2-3 weeks on a contract wouldn't be something I'd really notice, but a year seems weird. Completely concur with you, Dustin. That seems notable. And also, and I'm not going to name this coach here because I don't want them associated with this in any way, but one coach at U of H we're going to talk about much later in this show recently got an extension, and there was the usual social media post and press release, notably absent, guys, on July 16th. You know who hasn't gotten we're excited to have our leader back for another year, or a U of H Cougars.com press release? You know who hasn't gotten that? Bobby, why don't you take a guess? You're a good guesser. Who hasn't gotten that?
Hold on.
You need a moment.
Samson.
No, it'd be Kristin Vesely, the coach. I know. I may have overstayed your abilities as a guesser.
I can't believe you put so much faith in me to make a good guess, and I got it wrong. I can't believe it.
Shows one out. But I mean, that might seem like a weird detail look, but I feel like that's not coincidence, guys. It's not coincidence that UH softball isn't jumping out there to be like, yeah, we got to go back Kristin Vesely for another season here. And this isn't going to be an entire rehashing of everything we've reported on with the U of H softball program, though I'd encourage anyone who hasn't to listen to our episodes 946 and 950, which have both come out in the last month or so. We go in depth on a lot of really unacceptable things that have been reported to us that have occurred under Kristin Vesely's leadership of the Houston Cougar softball program. But I'm going to purely, for the sake of this segment, guys, putting everything aside we reported, and I personally won't be putting it aside, and I imagine neither of you will be putting it aside, but for the sake of argument here, this is an extremely insane extension to give for purely on-field reasons. It's worth rehashing. U of H has not finished a regular season with a winning record since 2019 and hasn't made the NCAA tournament in that same period. In its first Big 12 season last spring, U of H finished dead last in the conference, a 4-23 record, multiple games back of the team directly above them in the standings. From the team that finished dead last in the standings, U of H has had all of its top position players / hitters either graduate or enter the transfer portal. Projected returners Taria Coleman and Lair Butte are now at Baylor and Ole Miss respectively. Also, you graduate your innings pitched and ERA leader in Shelby Smith. There are 11 players right now, guys, on the U of H softball website, and no currently committed transfers that I can find from any online source, along with a handful of high school players. So yeah, you're probably bringing at least 7 or 8 portal players who are not committed to the program right now on July 16th, not to mention really, you had an extremely successful head coach in your neck of the woods, UL Lafayette's Jerry Glasgow, looking for a power conference job this offseason very aggressively and ending up at another Big 12 program in your general part of the standings in Texas Tech. A number of other qualified candidates that I guess weren't worth considering over the possibility of bringing a head coach back. And I think, again, purely from an on-field perspective, probably throwing away your 2025 season. And I don't know, guys, this is up there, if not the most baffling decision that U of H has made in my almost 20 years as a fan. Like, it's so insane. And I think a reminder of why I'll never be sorry that the last guy was pushed out of his job. There's a lot of failures of leadership, and I think a failure to hold people accountable for stacking on-field results, not even before getting into the other stuff that's been alleged here.
Yeah, that's the baffling part for me. You know, we can, all the things that we reported on and we talked about, terrible. Any coach should be let go for that. But any coach should be let go for her performance on the field. It's awful. It hasn't been great. There's been moments, really good moments, beating Texas, things like that. But it just hasn't. Anybody who even slightly watches softball, who knows a little bit about softball, could have told you that roster last year was probably not going to win a lot of softball games. We talked about it preseason. We talked about it preseason. We talked about it when we did our predictions for the year. We talked about we were like, I don't really, this team's going to hit a ton, but you know, softball isn't really the sport where you get into 10-9 games and win a lot of them, you know, and it played out. It played out. And to your point, Sam, there's nobody coming in there. You know, you look at the roster and you're like, there looks like there's 12 people on the roster. It looks like there's 12 players on the roster. Like, you
might be like at 17 or 18 when the freshman comes in. Maybe.
It's like, what are we doing here? Like, putting aside everything we talked about, which is really hard to put aside, it wasn't good enough on the field. And as much as Dustin, it really seems like you got your fingers crossed, like maybe she's going to be the softball coach next year. Like, I hate to say it, come January, come February, we're going to see her on the sidelines. We're going to see her in the dugout doing her thing. And I hope that they go undefeated and that they win the Big 12 and they go to Oklahoma City. I also know that that's probably not going to happen based on the results I've seen in the past. So I guess, what does it look like? You know,
I hope I strike gold when I step on the ground to go outside to work tomorrow, but it's not going to fucking happen either.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I feel weird saying this, and I hadn't really thought about this until you brought this up right now. I don't hope they go undefeated next year. If they go undefeated next year, they'll have to bring Kristin Vesely back for another year, despite the absolute, completely unacceptable off the field stuff. If she is the coach next year, I hope they lose. I don't want U of H to have a reason to keep bringing her back and putting student athletes into an unacceptable situation. That is less important to me than getting her the hell out of this school, getting her the hell out of Houston. You know, I don't want her here. I don't want the team to win games under her. As selfish as that sounds,
that's fair.
There's been other situations where, you know, even when we've gone through things, you know, we've said, hey, even when a certain someone whose last name rhymes with Tiles was an assistant coach for the football team, we kind of went through this and said, hey, you know, we can still cheer for the players, and it's not their fault that the coach got brought in, and we can cheer for the players and not be cheering for the coaches necessarily. But I don't know. I think this is a bridge too far for me. I think if U of H brings her back for another year, and we've kind of talked about this, that we wouldn't even talk about the softball program necessarily if she came back. I don't think we've made a final decision on that, but I think that would be the bridge too far for me, where I'd say, you know what, I can't even pull for this team to win right now.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. And as I have good news, they will not be going undefeated, so you don't have to
luckily
have to sweat that one too much in all likelihood.
Yeah, just wild, man. And you guys talked about one transfer committed to the program this offseason and then decommitted and committed to another program. Maybe not coincidentally with some of the other stuff that's going on there. So just how on earth, so many things. Again, you guys keep saying it. You don't want to put aside everything that we've reported, but even putting it aside, the results are such that you got to let her go. The complete inability at this point to put together anything resembling a Division I, let alone a power conference softball roster. I mean, it's just, it's completely untenable to have her around. And I hope you guys are probably right that there's no chance that anything happens, but man, I would love literally any situation that we could avoid having her back for another year.
Yeah.
And obviously, like I said, not strictly because I want to cheer for this team and because we'll win more games with somebody else, but, you know, for lots of reasons. No easy transition, guys, but let's talk some Cougar football. We got a few different Cougar football subjects to get into. We're going to start with Big 12 football media days, which happened in Vegas while Sam and I were both in Vegas, and we did not go because we are terrible, terrible Cougars. But my fiance,
I'm just gonna be honest. Like the thought of going to Allegiant Stadium and listening to primarily a bunch of other like Big 12 players and coaches just didn't appeal to me, man.
Didn't sound like a great way to spend my vacation with my fiance, so I think she's probably glad we didn't make that happen. But guys, who wants to start? Bobby, you want to jump in here and tell us what did you like or otherwise from what you heard at Big 12 Media Days?
Yeah, so the big thing I watched all 3 minutes of Willie Fritz's press conference because nobody was interested in asking him
8.5
any questions. No, everybody was like, "Why are you here?" Like. I felt really bad for him because, like, it's his first one. He's finally a P5 guy or a P4 guy, you know, and he's probably pretty excited. He's in the Big 12, and everyone's like, "Hey, man, your team wasn't good last year. What are you gonna do about that?" And he's like, "We're gonna play football." And so but the thing I thought was interesting, he kind of said this, and I think I tweeted it out on the podcast account. That was my first tweet on the podcast account. All right. Anyways, he said, "I'm recruiting people within a car ride from the university." And you kind of look at the recruiting class and you go, "Oh yeah, he is." It's everybody's pretty much within 7-8 hours of the of Houston. And the other thing that I have found really interesting, looking at the recruiting class and then with him, there's a lot of he clearly made inroads with coaches in Louisiana. He definitely has decided Louisiana has really good football players as well as Texas. And we've seen that before with U of H when we can start getting into Louisiana, dipping in over there. You're not going to take guys from LSU that, you know, are from that are from the New Orleans area and they're good enough to go to LSU, something like that, Alabama, something along those lines. But you're going to be competing with the Mississippi States of the world, the Ole Misses, you know, some of those middle ground SEC schools. And I got to tell you, that excites me. We have talked about on here, you know, a lot of U of H fans love to say stars don't matter. Usually the teams that have the most stars tend to do the best. But I like to look at offer list, and the offer list that he has been bringing in, his recruits that he has been signing, their offer lists are no longer, we're competing against UTSA, nothing against UTSA, but we're not competing against them. Ooh la la, we're not competing against Louisiana. We're competing against Mississippi State. Ole Miss. I'm calling them that. Oh, that is ooh la la.
You did ooh la la.
Louisiana is ooh la la. I don't know why I was thinking of Louisiana Monroe, but then I was like, no, not them. And then my brain went in a different direction. So I really like the offer list, and I just thought it was interesting that he said we're recruiting guys who are within a car ride. I would ask him, if I was there, I would have asked this, but how long do you consider a car ride? Are we talking 7 hours, 8 hours, 13 hours? Like, what do we consider in here? So that would kind of be a follow-up question I would love to ask Coach Fritz there.
I think what stood out to me is the fact that all of the players that came with Fritz to Vegas were returning guys who were brought in by the previous staff and stuck around under this new one. Not that any of those guys wouldn't have merited inclusion by their college resumes at this point. Donovan Smith's a veteran returning starter at quarterback. Tank Jenkins and Jamal Morris are both veterans who've played a bunch. Latrell McCutcheon probably would have started a season ago if he hadn't been made to sit as a two-time transfer. And also, McCutcheon getting the invite jives with what I've heard about his performance in spring practices, really wowing the new staff. It's a reminder that while the roster does look a good bit different from this time 12 months ago, there still are plenty of contributors who stuck around under Fritz and staff, plenty of guys who are bought in with what he wants to do. Now that really changes how I feel about the challenges of 2024, specifically with a first-year head coach and staff. You didn't get an easy draw of a Big 12 schedule, and your non-conferences, 2 G5 teams who went bowling and OU on the road. So wins are going to be hard to come by. Also, just the general vibe, not to take your place, Bobby, as the vibes guy, but every time Willie Fritz gets in front of a podium, literally metaphorically, to talk to any media, it's a reminder of what a better representative he is of the program than the last head coach, much as the last head coach could be very entertaining at times. And I think zooming out even more, you get the vibe that he seems to enjoy coaching football and is energized by the occupation more than the last guy seemed to be the last couple seasons at the University of Houston, which that was just the small stuff that stood out to me.
Yeah, the real head, you mentioned McCutcheon, the cornerback, and real heads didn't just stick with his 8.5 minutes on the podium. They listened to his 11 plus minutes with the ESPNU crew as well. And he was asked a question, and one of the guys that he mentioned was McCutcheon, and just could not say enough good things about him and what a big time talent he thought he was at cornerback. So it got me more excited for what I think is going to turn out to be a pretty good secondary this year for the Cougars with a lot of the transfers they got coming in. In terms of some of the things that he said, I thought he gave an interesting, maybe kind of diplomatic quote about the offensive line when he said, "We've got to do a good job with the guys we've got on the offensive line," which sounded suspiciously close to, "We're going to do the best we can with the guys we've got on the offensive line." And he also said that Tank Jenkins, the lone returning starter, was the only guy who had a starting spot for the coming year locked down, and expected early season rotation at the other 4 spots to figure out who can play and who all is going to play together. Really liked the stable of running backs and wide receivers, which I think kind of jabs with what we've thought about the roster. Sounds just so excited about Donovan Smith, which is cool to me. Smith, I think, was kind of up and down last year. I think on the balance, most Houston fans would probably say he underperformed a little bit from the expectations we had coming in. And I also think just about every Houston fan, including the 3 of us, are excited to see what he looks like under what we assume will be a better run coaching staff, a more successful coaching staff than the previous one. So hearing Fritz as excited as he was about Donovan Smith, I think was really exciting for me. And then, he got asked both on the podium and by, I think it was Brock Osweiler at the ESPNU desk, kind of what's a reasonable expectation for year one. And, both times he said, "Hey, we want to win every football game that we're playing. We want to go out there and win every game." But he did also say in one of the interviews, he said, "We'll find out a lot about ourselves after the first few weeks," which kind of sounds like you may be acknowledging the possibility of needing a year 0 if, say, you get clobbered by Oklahoma by 40 and you lose to UNLV or Rice or something like that. But he also said to multiple people, "Hey, we don't have a 3-year plan to institute the roster that we want, to institute the culture that we want. We've got a 1-year plan. We've got to get this going right now." And as hard as Houston has hit the portal under Willie Fritz, as kind of senior and upperclassman heavy as I think Houston's 2 deep is going to end up probably being by the time we get to the start of the season, I think that it is reasonable to have some expectations that Houston is going to have some capacity to surprise some people in year one. I don't think Houston's going 1-11 this year. We will talk a little bit more when we get to the preseason poll. Again, the concerns about Houston's schedule this year are very real. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say that even that we're going to go bowling, but I think Houston has enough upperclassmen kind of talent on this roster now, and with Willie Fritz running the show. I don't know. I kind of feel kind of good. I think it's gonna be fun to go into this year with no real expectations on you, and I have a odd suspicion that Houston's gonna maybe surprise a couple people.
Whatever you're on, give me some of it. You are on the preseason hype. Oh, the hopium is strong coming from Houston.
I'm not going to make a bowl game most likely, and it is. I don't know if that's getting too crazy. I think that Houston's going to beat a couple of teams this year. I won't say who. I think Houston is going to win at least 1 or 2 games this year that people go, oh, really? Like, okay, First has got this going. So it is, but it is. It's kind of a good place to be, because if Houston goes 3-9, 4-8, that's what you kind of expected. That's the year 0. That's the insane schedule that you probably won't face quite as difficult of a schedule again in the future, or at least not in the near future, until you've got your program up and running a little bit. So, hey, if things go south, I am totally okay taking the year 0. I just, I tried to put together kind of my predicted 2 deep a week or 2 ago, and it was more seniors than I really thought. And I go, okay, I don't know. A lot of seniors on this roster. Willie Fritz is a hell of a coach. We'll see. I think Houston's going to do some things this year. I just don't know if one of those things is going to be, go to a bowl game.
I'm picking up where you're putting down, Dustin. And I was going to say, I think good transition here to the preseason poll, where the Cougars were 15th out of 16 Big 12 teams.
Yeah, not terribly surprising to see them second from the bottom. And most media outlets have had Houston there, kind of in their power rankings as well, only ahead of Arizona State, somewhat semi-narrowly behind teams like Cincinnati, BYU, and Baylor, who are the next 3 teams going up from Houston. And yeah, I think, like I said, that speaks to the expectations. That speaks to the kind of year that Houston had last year, and kind of the roster reset that Willie Fritz has had to do. And kind of, it brings it back to what Sam said. You got Oklahoma in the non-conference. So here's probably your toughest 6 games this year. Oklahoma, and then you've got 5 of the 6 teams that were picked in the top 6 in the Big 12 preseason poll on your schedule. Number 1, Utah on the schedule. Number 2, Kansas State. Yep. Number 4, Kansas. Number 5, Arizona. Number 6, Iowa State. 5 of the projected toughest 6 teams in the conference on your schedule. You throw in Oklahoma, that's literally half of your schedule this year, which is why I was saying I'm not going to get carried away and say we're going to a bowl game or anything this year. I'm a little bit realistic, but yeah, that preseason poll was definitely, as much as I am excited for this football season from a, no expectations, whatever. I think that, yeah, the preseason poll is probably gives you a little bit of a realistic expectation that it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I had no, in fact, I saw 15th. I was like, hey, not last, not DFL. Let's go, boys. Let's go. It could be worse. You have the, both teams kind of recently got rid of a pretty toxic coach who wasn't doing a lot with us in Arizona State, who just kind of set the program back, or it feels like they set the program back a couple of years. So, 2 teams kind of in a similar situation, bringing up the rear, but very, very happy that we weren't last. Not surprised where we were. I didn't go into this thinking, oh, we could be a top half of the Big 12 team this year. Didn't have any qualms about that going into it. So no big surprise there.
Yeah, I think it's a number that the Cougs could end up doing better than when it's all said and done, but I can step back from my own U of H biases enough to say that I don't think it's an unfair ranking. The team struggled pretty badly in Big 12 play last year. Worth a reminder that outside of your 2 wins, both by just about the narrowest margins that you could win a game by, and the surprisingly close and controversially officiated, it must be reiterated, loss to a certain burnt orange school in Austin, you were basically uncompetitive in every other Big 12 game, including against some bad teams like Cincinnati. Cincinnati had its worst season in ages, and they just so thoroughly outclassed you in your own stadium. You lost key players on both sides of the ball to graduation, portal departures, the kind of stuff you see after a head coaching change.
We had one of our worst seasons in ages as well.
No, I'm not trying to do that. And I think U of H addressed last season's poor performance with a coaching change of somebody we're all very excited about. And for the umpteenth time, I think I'll say on this show that Fritz and the staff will get more out of this roster than the last head coach did out of his last roster. But it's a hard schedule, harder than last year in all likelihood, and I don't believe U of H will go winless in conference play, but there's a very real possibility, guys, that U of H is the betting line underdog in all 9 Big 12 games they play this fall. I don't think they're going winless, but that could happen. I don't mind the guys getting a little free motivation from being picked second to last, but I don't think it's an unfair ranking when it's all said and done.
We would be the betting line favorite if it wasn't for the fact that we're going to beat Oklahoma, and then that'll make us the favorite in a bunch of games going forward. So that's what's going on this year.
To quote my co-host here, yeah, I'm whatever you're on, give me some of it, man.
So what I'm on is that, and I don't need to talk crap about him because we love him very much. He's been on the podcast, great guy. Shahan Jayaraja did his predicting every Big 12 game and predicted us to lose all 9 of our games. That got me a little fired up, and I'm like, picking us to lose to Baylor, a team we beat in Waco, and now that we got them at home this year. Okay, let's just.
The guy told they have Toledo's quarterback and Dave Aranda, and the guy who won 8 games in 4 years at Texas State. Big fucking whoop.
But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Maybe because I've said that, I'm jinxing us the hell out of us. But right. We'll see. One thing that's not going to help Houston win games this year is the unfortunate news we got within the last week or so that Tulane transfer linebacker Corey Platt Jr. is going to be missing the entire season with an Achilles injury. Platt had a really impressive breakout redshirt freshman season for Tulane in 2020, and then in the season opener last year against South Alabama, in less than 3 quarters of football, accumulated 15 tackles, a sack, and a torn Achilles to end his season. And then this new injury, Achilles injury as well. I'm kind of assuming he is re-injured the same Achilles. Honestly, that or injuring the other one after you injured the first one, both of those seem equally insanely frustrating to deal with. So obviously you feel for the player first and foremost, and then long term with it being another Achilles injury, you just have to wonder about the long term effects. You hope that he's able to, even at some point, whether that's next year or whatever, regain his full kind of range and strength of movement after now multiple Achilles injuries. And just, in terms of how that's going to affect Houston this year, it sucks, man. It's losing a guy who looked like a surefire starter at linebacker, right as you're switching from a 3 linebacker base to a 4 linebacker base defense, and you only have, I think he was one of 7 scholarship linebackers currently listed on the roster. It's not great. It's not a great sign with the need for starters and the need for just bodies at that position to lose a guy like Platt who looked like he was going to be a big contributor this year.
Yeah, even though linebacker sounds like it was a position group that was a nice surprise in spring ball, you'd certainly want to have Platt as part of the group of the perfect world, and just stings for the young man that he's having to still deal with, whether it's an aggravation of the previous injury or a new one.
Yeah. It's always disappointing when you see a player go down with injury, especially the same one that they already had. Yeah. To your point, Dustin, whether it's the same or it's the opposite one, kind of something that happens a lot with injuries is, you hurt your right leg and then your left leg carries all the weight and you're limping and you're doing all that. And it just, you start using it in a different way, and you really hope that, he didn't have that happen to him. So that would be very unfortunate.
All right, let's keep it going with some Cougar men's hoops off-season news, some former Cougar alumni news, actually, mostly is what we got going on, starting with Jamal Shead, as you probably know by now, taken in the second round of the NBA draft by the Toronto Raptors, a team that struggled mightily last year to the tune of a 25-57 record. Everything I've kind of read is, as someone who knows very little about the NBA until it matters because there's some Cougs playing in there. Sounds like a team that needs a defensive makeover, which I think Jamal is certainly the right guy to help with in that department. We all know, and all of the summer league stuff that I've read about him has been overwhelmingly positive thus far. So, never easy to make it as a second round NBA draft pick, a much steeper hill to climb than someone taking you in the lottery or in the first round. But, I think we all know that Jamal Shead is not going to be fazed by that.
No, and I like the Raptors situation. Like you, Dustin, not somebody who is a diehard NBA fan these days, but I think it's a nice balance of an organization with, coming off a bad season, but has been well run historically. Not a situation where the roster also is the opposite. It's so entrenched that Jamal Shead has no prayer of ever getting into the rotation because they're 8 or 9 deep coming off a championship or a finals appearance or something like that. I think that Raptors have a pretty solid developmental track record as well. So I think adds to the reasons why it's a good destination for Shead to start his NBA career, and has a nice little start at the Vegas Summer League as well.
Yeah, he's looked good in Summer League from everything that I've read. Not that I'm out here just, scouting Summer League, taking down notes, things like that. But everyone seems to be pretty happy with him. Great situation for him, it seems. No doubt Jamal's going to go and do what Jamal does best and represent the Cougs better than almost anybody ever has.
Other Cougs in the Summer League, Jarris Walker, been playing in the Summer League a lot, and it seems like he's getting some strong reviews from how he's been performing. He was a lottery pick a year ago for Indiana, but didn't play a whole lot as a rookie. Obviously still super young, just 2 years out of high school, so plenty of time for him to develop. Obviously hoping to see him get a little more PT this year. Marcus Sasser has been more specifically playing point guard for the Pistons. It sounds like in summer, working on that, working on the facilitating aspect of his game. From what it sounds like, seems that's going reasonably well. Nate Hinton and Fabian White, I know, are both on the Rockets roster for Summer League, although I haven't seen a lot about them playing, and Fabian White's on the TBT team as well, so maybe that doesn't indicate that he's expecting to be a big part of that Rockets Summer League team. I don't know, but just very fun to see that league, and now every year it seems like more and more be filled with Cougar alumni.
Yeah, I think for Jarris Walker, you would hope that a former lottery pick would be doing well in Summer League, but I would still say the performances are notably quite good. 20 points, 7 boards, and 4 assists in those first 2 games in Vegas has shown off that uncommon ability for a guy his size that I think we saw at U of H to create for his teammates and also shoot it from the outside, despite being built like a tank, built like maybe a more traditional power forward, but with I think a skill set uncommon for a guy that size. Nice highlight play by Marcus Sasser in their Summer League game. I believe it was last night against the Rockets. He does a nice drive to the hoop where he finishes over the Rockets' first-round pick, Reed Shepherd. 13 points that one, so nice, cool highlight there from Sasser's Summer League so far out in Vegas.
And just let me mention Quentin Grimes coming to Dallas. So excited to go watch him play this year.
Yeah, okay, fine.
You getting your Mavericks jersey, Sam?
I am not getting my Mavericks jersey.
Okay.
If anyone can find a website that's not a certainty to have my credit card information stolen from it, it also has a possibility to get a Jamal Shead throwback Raptors jersey, though. Slide in the DMs or
that's a good one.
shpodcast@gmail.com.
Some other Cougar basketball alumni stuff. TBT, or the basketball tournament, is also set to begin on Friday. If you're not familiar with TBT, it is a single elimination tournament that's been running every year since 2014, most years with 64 teams. I believe that's the case this year again. Rosters comprised of your not quite NBA level players, often grouped as alumni teams for various schools. And you probably guessed, if you didn't already know, the reason we're bringing this up is that Houston has a team for the first time this year. Not only that, but their team will be starting out hosting games at the Fertitta Center. The U of H team is called Forever Coogs. They'll face Austin's own, a UT Austin alumni team, on Friday at 8 p.m. at the Fertitta Center. If they win, Houston would advance to a Sunday game in the same building against either a New Mexico or Boise State alumni team. So if you're wanting to get out there on Friday and see some of your beloved former Cougs, there's going to be a bunch of them on that team. Rob Gray, Dejan Giroux, Wes Van Beck, Fabian White, Justin Gorham, Devontae Pollard, Tayshaun Thomas, Devin Davis, Eric Weary Jr., as well as a trio of non-U of H alums that are going to help round out that roster. So sadly, I have plans I cannot get out of on Friday evening, so I will not be able to be at that game, but just absolutely praying for a Sunday second-round game, because, man, it just sounds cool as hell to see a bunch of the old band back together.
Yeah, love the representation from some of the early Samson teams, but also the previous era of U of H as well. Tayshaun Thomas, Devontae Pollard. Those are 2 nice adds to the front court, as well as Eric Weary Jr. Also, really, really, really excited to see a backcourt, even though there are times that U of H didn't overlap, with Rob Gray and Deke on the court at the same time. Really, I think a strong roster. Current professionals, I think, largely making up the roster. Won't pretend I've done a scouting report on the rest of the TBT field, but this should be a good team just based on the roster quality. I'm having way more FOMO than I expected, guys, that I live too far away to make it out Friday night. Because it's just a who's who of a lot of my favorite Cougs of the past 6-7 years as well.
Yeah, man. Getting to see Rob Gray back on the floor is going to just be, I don't know why. But
get to see Rob Gray at the Fertitta Center. Get Rob Gray, a guy who was so pivotal in this team becoming what it's been, getting to finally play at the big arena that is kind of a result of that.
He kind of built. He kind of was the foundation for it. So I don't know why, but like
Devin Davis too.
Yeah, I just saw Rob Gray and I was like, God, man, that is that's fantastic. Like that one made me really excited to see that name pop back up. That and Justin Gorham, I don't know why. Justin Gorham was a guy
because he's fucking awesome. That's why
as well. So those 2 were the ones that I saw that I was just like, yeah, and always good to see Deke. But there was something about Rob Gray and Justin Gorham when I saw those names. I was like, all right, let's go, man.
Yeah. Speaking of some guys moving on to their pro careers, we saw in the last couple of days a trio of Cougars taken in the Major League Baseball draft. Somewhat ironically, given U of H's success hitting the ball and woes pitching the ball this past year, all 3 draft picks were pitchers. Jackson Jelkin, the first Cougar selected, taken in the 9th round by the Mets. I think a good advertisement for the U of H coaching staff. He was taken in the 14th round a year ago at JUCO. Was able to bump that up by 5 rounds. Still has another year of eligibility left if he wants it, but I'd be surprised if we see him back. Cade Satelli, another pitcher, taken 2 rounds later in the 11th round by the Tampa Bay Rays. And then in the 15th round, the Mets went back to the U of H well of arms and took Owen Woodward. Also of note, a Houston baseball commitment, high school player Braylon Payne from Elkins High School was taken 17th overall in the first round. So probably not going to see him on campus. I'm sad to say, but
undervalue his slot. Undervalue his slot. Come on.
Was it Matthew Perk? Wasn't that the guy for TCU way back in the day that got drafted the first round? Anyway,
who? By the way, do you know who the lead recruiter on that TCU staff was?
Todd Whitting.
Todd Whitting. Yep,
absolutely. So, and because of that reason, I'm always like, if we ever get some first round guy, I'm just gonna keep my. But no, I'm gonna say 99% chance if I'm setting the odds there. Mr. Payne's gonna be playing minor league baseball a year from now, but either way, good year, bad year. Always fun to see some Cougs taking their first steps into their professional careers.
Yeah, I was gonna say, they're all cool stories. I'm excited for all the guys who got drafted. Cade Satelli is the one I wanted to single out, though. Like a guy who his first season in the program, 2023, flashed good swing and miss stuff, but also walked an extraordinarily high number of batters. Came from UT Arlington, where good swing and miss stuff, but just abysmal control. This past season cuts down massively in the walks while still striking out guys at a good clip. And I would say after Jelkin went down hurt in late March, was U of H's most reliable starting pitcher in a bright spot. It was otherwise not a great year for Cougar pitching, but I really enjoy when guys who have this kind of unbelievable talent, like Satelli Flash at times, are able to put together, and in his case, get a shot at professional baseball with an MLB organization as a result. So happy for all 3, but Satelli in particular, I think is kind of a cool story out of that trio.
Yeah, just to kind of reiterate what you said, awesome to see guys get drafted. You do kind of get a little upset, heavy air quotes there, when you see them go fairly high in the MLB draft, and you're just like, well, why did we? What happened, guys? So it's but overall, super excited for those guys. Always good to see Cougars getting drafted, things like that. It helps recruiting, all that kind of stuff. So.
All right, Bobby, we're running a little late in this podcast, and I think you want to go ahead and cover our last story point here, since this is your domain.
Yeah. So. Big extension for the women's golf coach, Coach Lydia. She signed, I believe it was a 2-year extension to continue leading the Lady Cougar golf team. Super exciting. She's really turned that program into a consistent top 25, top 30 kind of program. She hasn't really missed the tournament. Had a good team this year. A lot of young talent on that team. So super excited, super happy she got her extension. When I met her at the tournament that I went to 2 seasons ago now, it was a super good time. She's a great ambassador for the university. Somebody that I was very excited when I saw that she got her extension.
Yeah, I think really cool. First-time head coach, inherited a good situation in the sense that her predecessor, the first UH head coach, Garrett Chadwell, did a good job, but had a largely new roster. And I think these last 2 seasons has really shown that she can build her own roster, and that she, even though she's a first-time head coach, is more than capable of leading this program into the Big 12. The team came so heartbreakingly close to making the NCAA championship for the first time as a team, but the fact that they're heartbreakingly close, I think just tells you they're ahead of a lot of the programs in this athletic department, that they're able to compete with the better Big 12 teams. I think says all you need to see, and I'm glad that U of H locked her up for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, no need to add too much when you got a coach that's winning at a high level with a really young roster and continuing to bring in exciting recruits. You lock them up for as long as you can. So good move by the U of H, even with no full-time athletics director currently in position to make the kind of slam dunk decision there. All right, that's going to be it for us on our way out. As always, huge Scott and Hohen podcast. Thank you to our Patreon supporters. Love what you guys are doing. If you are listening, you're not yet a Patreon supporter, and you want to earn yourself some good karma by supporting the work that the three of us do on a usually weekly basis. You can go to patreon.com/SH podcast. $5 a month will get you in there, and we'll get you some of the bonus content we put out from time to time, as well as just the aforementioned good karma. If you want to reach out and say hi, email us, shpodcast@gmail.com, tweet at us at shpodcast, blue sky at us at podcast.bsky.social. And that's going to be it. If you made it all the way to the end, you're my absolute hero. And as always,
go Coogs.
All right. Go Coogs. Let's go.